But now if you join me in welcoming April Malphurs. April, the title of your show is Refraction, expressing joy through glass, correct? Can you tell us about the inspiration for the show?
Yeah, so I came to working with glass as a sculptor. I wasn't, I didn't grow up thinking I would become a glass blower. I was making sculptures that dealt a lot with shadows and light, and then it kind of occurred to me that glass would be the perfect medium. And I initially started out working with beadwork and then went on to learn glass blowing. And I just love the way light shines through glass, how it makes colorful shadows. And my work, usually people describe it as whimsical, and I really want to bring joy to people's lives. And so my message with the title of the show is that in life we have a lot of difficult things that we go through, but we can always have the choice of, instead of focusing on that, trying to find the joy in life. And so I'm hoping that other people find joy in my art.
So the work is meant to elicit a joyful response from the viewer?
Yes.
Is it also, is there any element of transmutation of negative feelings in your work? Do you come into it trying to transform feelings into joyful expressions, or do you have to be joyful in order to begin working?
No, I think for me that glass blowing is a form of mindfulness. I've often joked that I'm not really good at meditation because I'm a little too hyperactive. And so when you're working in glass, you have to really be paying attention to what you're doing and really in the moment.
Sure.
Gravity has a huge effect on glass, and if you weren't really paying attention, you'd just landed on the floor. So I feel like for me, when I go to blow glass, it's an escape from anything that could be going on in my life that's difficult, and I go there and I come out feeling very rejuvenated and refreshed by the experience. So.
Glass, first off, it makes me nervous. Through perceived fragility at the very least. When working with glass, it seems so much, it seems intimidating because of what goes into it, the fragility. You have to heat it up, correct, to work it?
Well, you dip into hot molten glass.
Okay.
Glass melts at 2,300 degrees, so it's very hot.
And that type of working with this material, I imagine it doesn't really lend itself to a home studio situation, or does it?
No, I can do the flame-worked bead parts in my home studio, but it's very, very expensive to set up a glass-blowing studio. And so I work out of Vandalia Glassworks in South St. Paul.
Okay. And is that common for glass artists to work at is that a co-op studio, or how does that work?
It's privately owned, and you just pay a rental to work there. Glassblowers tend to usually work with partners because you can't really add color and do a lot of different technical things that you like, that are expressive in glass blowing all by yourself. There are some people that do blow all alone, but it takes a lot of practice, and I don't know, I think for me it would be very limiting because a lot of what I like to do is with color and
Sure.
Different techniques that you would need someone else to help with that.
It sounds dangerous? I mean, do you think it's a good idea to blow glass alone?
Yeah, well, I mean, the people that know how to do it, I mean, they're fine.
Sure.
But I prefer working with a partner just because, like I said, of the color aspects and being able to do things that I want. I also like to add a lot of texture, like with the beehive and stuff like that. And in order to do that, you need people bringing you, dripping hot glass. So that would be hard to coordinate all by yourself. So.
How long does it generally take, or maybe how long did it take you, or do you feel like it generally takes a person to get working with glass?
Well, for me, I work, I'm a mom,
Yeah.
so I'm not, blowing every day, all day. People do go to college in a 4-year program.
Sure.
But I've been blowing for 10 years, and I still consider myself, kind of advanced beginner or intermediate level. I wouldn't say that I'm a pro in any way.
Sure.
Because I think it takes a long time to, gain a lot of skills.
But the work you have on display here is gorgeous,
Thank
and
you.
it does exhibit very sophisticated engagement with space. So your skill is on display in the work in the show. Relatedly, some of the works are decidedly functional, right?
Yeah.
And others are purely sculptural and non-functional. Do you have a preference?
Yeah, I love doing the sculptural stuff. It's where my heart is. My dream would be to take a couple of those smaller, like the 2 installations in the glass cases, and to do a huge room.
Sure.
And I have sketches of what I'd like to do, but it'll, it's kind of the type of project that will require a much larger grant to fund that. Because, unless there was some corporation that wanted me to do it for
Right.
them. So it would require quite a bit of money.
Sure. Just quickly, how's the volume for people? Good? Up a little bit? So, yeah,
sorry.
that's what I'm
Sorry.
checking. No,
I'm
no
an
worries.
artist, not a performer.
We're first time we've been in person. We're all lucky that, we wore appropriate clothes. You mentioned sketches. Do you, with the material that you're working with, which is very process heavy, do you begin a work with kind of schematic drawings, conceptual drawings? Tell us about your process from ideation to object.
Sure. Yeah, I often do some sketches that I work from, and even like with the beehive, I did some sketches of how I wanted to do that, and then also I kind of sketched out the steps that I would take in the hot shop, so that when I was working with a partner, then they could help me, and they knew exactly what I would want at each step, and I could kind of walk them through that. So to me, it's both a way of kind of thinking it through and planning, and then also being able to communicate with the person that I'm going to be working with. But then at the same time, there's an element to it that, as I'm making that beehive, it's very much a process. Like the first I just went in for a day and just worked by myself, dripping the hot glass onto a table and then stamping into it, and just kind of playing with that to see how I liked it and if it was working the way I wanted it to. And for that, I just worked in color and was just kind of playing all day. And then once I kind of figured out how I wanted it to be and kind of got the ideas of it, then I went back another time and worked with the partner, being able to put them on top of each other.
So the working drawings that you generate, are they somewhat like blueprints for construction documents for folks communicating, well, this is going to be here, but how much flexibility is there?
Well, yeah, I mean, sometimes if like I'm making something and then I'm like, oh, I actually kind of like this shape better or whatever, I change. It's not like, I mean, glass is very fluid in nature. So, so sometimes, your idea might change along with it.
Yeah.
But I can, sketch something and then make it look like the sketch too. So.
How often do you feel like you stay true to that initial sketch versus follow some other path that presents itself?
I'd say quite a bit of the time I stay true to it,
Yeah.
because the sketches aren't like set in stone. Like it's a sketch with the flowers. I sketch out like I'm going to use these colors, and I have it planned out because you have to lay out your materials. But when I'm cutting into that hot glass, which
We
might
lost,
have a
yeah,
picture of. You're cutting into the glass itself and then
I'll
pulling
run
it.
up there
And so that would, so like the exact number of pieces that I'm pulling out and things would change depending on, that moment. So let's see if we can. You're not
Oh, let me
connected.
X out of that. Get my steps in. All right, if you hit that play button too.
I'm just going to go
Oh, sure.
through to the piece I'm talking about. And I can go back to that one about a sketch in just a second for you, too. Actually, okay. So here, when I was talking about, so for this, I didn't initially make a sketch. I just had these images of beehives that I collected, and then I did the process, like I was saying, exploring, and then I did a sketch to show the person that I was going to be working with what I was doing.
Sure.
This wasn't really a normal thing. It was
Yeah.
a very different process that I was doing. And then...
Is that an established process, or was that something
Just-
that you devised?
Well, I often stamp into my pieces. You can see on, sorry.
No,
This is
that's
a slideshow for high school tomorrow. But like if you look at this piece, the yellow ones are all stamped on. So a person would bring me a hot piece of glass that's all warmed up and melted with the color in it, and then I would cut it off and take the stamp and press in to get that spirally texture on the yellow stamps. But then for the hive, I decided to just use stamping, and so it's just poured out, stamped, another layer poured on and stamped. And so there isn't actually a blown piece to it. It was just me kind of exploring how to create this image I had in my head. So
What type of surface do you pour it onto?
we had, if there's like a plate that you would use like in a kiln or in a annealer, or it's just made of plaster. And so I worked on top of that, on top of the Malphurs table, which is made of metal. And then that way, in between layers, I could put it back into the glory hole to keep it warm, because glass, is very temperature sensitive, and so you don't want it to cool off. Also, the hot glass won't stick to things that are cold. They both have to be warm, So yeah, so that surface is where I worked from, and then we would just keep adding the layers of the glass to it.
Where do you find your inspiration primarily?
Well, there's a lot of inspiration coming from nature, as you can see. The floral ones, it was actually the middle of winter a couple years ago, and I was just tired of Minnesota winter. And so I started researching tropical flowers, and like those images in the middle, they're just really wild looking. And I was like, oh, this could be so fun to just do all these fantasy flowers. And so then I just started sketching. And yeah, that's part of an idea that I have for just having these all hanging and then having ones coming up from the ground like the ones in this show. And then each piece is blown separately and then assembled together afterwards. And this bee kept photobombing my pictures, and then I was like, I kind of like this, and so that's how the whole part about the bees came into it, and I started making bees and then the hive to go with it. So
The hive pieces sprung from this event.
yes.
Cool.
Yeah.
When you say each element is generated or made, and then they're assembled together, how does assembly work? What type of mechanism
am I putting them
yeah.
together with? So some people might assemble with hot glass pieces, and you just would bring them back up to temperature. These are so heavy and long that that I actually epoxy them together. And I had talked to several other artists about like going back and forth on which way to do it. And the final clincher for me was someone who never epoxies anything. And she was just like, you have to epoxy those. And so I was like, okay, that's kind of what I was going with. And that confirmed it for me because she never uses it herself. And so, yeah, just the weight of it, I think it would just not be nearly as strong. I've heard people joke that if you drop a piece that has been epoxied together, the glass might break, but the places where the epoxy is will stay together. So it's pretty strong stuff. And so then the next picture that I was showing you is an example of cutting into the hot glass. And so that's where I was saying, like, I'll do a sketch, but it's not like I'm going to be meticulously trying to make each of those cuts match the sketch. It's going to be more organic in the way that it happens in the studio. So I don't know if you can tell, but like I've blown the form and then I'm taking shears and cutting straight into the glass, and then I keep heating it and then pulling them slowly out to make the points.
Are the shears tools made specifically for glass work, or are they general?
No, they're glass blowing shears.
How much of the tooling is stuff that a person could pick up like over at Hant's Hardware here in town?
No, you
Not a
would
thing.
order it from specialty glass blowing places.
Sure.
I do have a regular drill that I use, but I have to have a tungsten drill bit that's smooth. Because if you had just a regular drill bit, it would just catch in the glass. But so I actually drill right into the hot glass. I brought a piece like that. So that's how I attach the wires in for the armatures of the beaded work.
Here and here, here and here.
Yeah. So it's when it's completely hot still, and then you have to have a torch that you're keeping the glass hot in that area, and then you just drill straight into it. So the drill you could get at Home Depot.
And is there a magic point at which it's perfect for drilling, or is there a fair amount of flexibility in how hot it is for that to happen?
No, you have to have it pretty hot. That's why you have to keep the torch on there. You actually keep the torch on the tungsten needle itself, and then you drill into the hot glass with it.
I think pre-pandemic, we'd probably had passed this around, but because everyone's comfort level is probably different, maybe during the intermission,
Yeah,
folks would
people
come up
can
and
come
take
up
a
and
look. So.
Yeah.
Do you work in any other mediums?
Yes, I think we flipped through, there's a painting series. I actually had a Prairie Lakes grant for it, and they changed like the requirements of finishing due to the pandemic, and so it's not a finished series yet, but it's for both mixed media paintings and some blown work all around the issues of teen girls and mental health. And
Yeah, let's take a
trying to
look.
think which direction that was. I guess it's back. So this one actually has come a lot further. And like the part at the bottom there where you can see I'm collaging those diamond shapes or triangular shapes in. And then on the edges of this, I'm using glass panels that are these faces that she's seeing that are kind of spooky and creepy, and they're in green glass. And then this
So you're combining paint and glass
and collage
Yeah.
and embroidery. Her hair, you can't really tell in this. I'm not sure if it was done yet, but it's all embroidered in the individual pieces of hair.
Wow.
And then this one is all collage, and again, this one was in progress, but it's now complete. And her hair and the finished piece is all done with yarn that's been attached in. So,
Have you always been an artist?
an artist and an art teacher, yeah.
Yeah.
So I've taught K through 5 art. Yeah, I went to college for interior design, hated the sales end of it, and went to grad school right away. So, yeah.
Cool. Cool. Do you, what is your favorite medium outside of glass? Or is glass your favorite medium?
Yeah, well, I consider myself a sculptor,
Yeah.
and yeah, I like sculpture was my absolute favorite thing to do, and yeah, glass is the medium that I'm mainly doing it with right now. So yeah,
Awesome.
it's also my favorite to teach too.
Is that right? And do you have opportunities to teach it to kids or?
Oh yeah, I mean, I don't know. I guess I just never have shied away from any media teaching
Yeah.
K through 5. I just recently found out that sculpture is the media that scares most art teachers, and that was shocking to me. I guess because of my own biases, but yeah, I mean, with kindergartners, I do these gigantic abstract paper mache sculptures, and they just love it. They have paper mache dripping from them, and my principal is afraid of art, but he loves what I do. So if he walks in and we're paper macheing, he usually is like, "Oh, I'll be back later." So
Maybe I'll start paper macheing around the office.
yeah.
I admit glass seems intimidating to me for many reasons, but I wonder, is it an expensive medium to work with?
Extremely expensive, yeah.
It is.
Yeah, which is why, glass costs so much to buy a piece. Glass color, so there are a couple different ways that you can add color. One is through frit, which is ground up glass. And then the other is through rods of glass. And so you would take a chunk of this and warm it up enough that you could pick it up and on a pipe and melt it more. And then you would add this into your color. I mean, on top of your clear.
Is that what's going on in this one? Color?
Yeah, so these are, I would have a partner pick up some clear and then rule it actually in the frit is what I usually do for these, just because I don't want to spend as much. Frit is cheaper than a rod, and then they bring it and put it onto here. With this, if I really wanted an opaque color, then I would use the color rods, and you would put it over the top of a small bubble, and then you just kind of coat it with the color. But so depending on the color you're buying, it affects the price. Usually a rod of glass is more that you buy is about this long, and it can range anywhere from about $35 up to like 90 or 100 and something. And the colors that are more expensive are like pinks and purples, because there are actually gold metal in the formula to make it that color.
Is it, my guess, and I don't know, is that there's pigment suspended in the glass? Is that how it's colored?
Well,
Or-
I mean, like all glass is part sand.
Yeah.
Actually, you guys could probably answer this better than me. But it's sand and silica, correct? And then the chemicals and metals that they're adding in to give you the color.
Okay.
So, yeah. I don't know. Did that answer that enough?
Oh, for sure.
I
I wasn't
will
trying to
admit-
ambush you. I was
No,
just
I will
really
admit that I
curious.
am like the worst scientist in the world. So,
Many times that's what attracts us to art making, isn't it? At least this guy. Very good. Was there anything that I failed to ask before we open it to the audience here?
no, I don't think so.
All right.
Yeah.
There are some tools there. Could you
Yes.
tell us about the tools?
Sure. So I only brought a couple things, but so these are jacks, and these are used when you're making a piece. You have to put in a line in the glass so that you can break it off evenly. And then I brought tongs, which are used for like tweezing, and especially when you're opening a piece, you would squeeze along it to pull and thin out the mouth part area. Newspaper is the most common and least expensive part of glass blowing, but you fold it up and wet it, and that's actually what you have between your hand and the glass most of the time. Sounds crazy, but it actually protects you. And then,
Cool.
and I guess with flame working, probably the most important piece is eye protection, because flame working is very dangerous for your eyes, because you can have like a solar flare with the glass being in the flame and melting.
So that's as much or primarily for brightness versus projectiles?
Yes, no, this is all about
Like welders?
it's
Yeah.
keeping your eyes protected. And if you're using boro, which is what they use to make Pyrex, for this you need an even darker pair of glasses. They're like green. I have just like a face shield similar to welders when I use this.
Where else might we view your work?
Vandalia Glassworks has a big gallery, and I have some work there. And then my website is aprilmalphurs.com. And I try to keep posts in the blog going there, and recent work, and so that's a good place to check in. And I just sell off of there. I used to do Etsy, but then I switched. So, yeah.
Cool.
Right now, those are the main places, just because with the pandemic, everything kind of went to a standstill. And I had work trapped in a mall for a year, but it's now free in here. So,
Good for us.
yes.
Yeah. And your exhibition is up through June 19th here. What's next?
Well, I want to complete the work on the mental health. It's called Disappearing Girl, teen girls and mental health issues or something like that. I'm forgetting it right now. Sorry. But yeah, I want to complete that. It's a series of 10 paintings, some blown forms that make up a big lotus flower that's talking about hope, and kind of the goal of the show is educating people of the importance of the issues, but also providing resources for people to know how they can get help for people. And then there also is a series of blown heads that I'm going to be making that are on teen girls and identity issues. So that's all part of it. So it's a pretty big undertaking, and I have a lot to do on it.
How do you fit it all in?
Yeah, I have a lot of plates spinning in my life.
Glass plates.
Yes.
Fantastic. Dynamite. April, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.